Is there a different approach if the product incremental improvement on something that everyone knows about versus disruptive innovation that's sort of hard for people to even wrap their mind around that hasn't been in the market before?
Sustainable success comes when there is no competition for what you do. Nobody was prioritizing this message of, and we solve unsolvable problems.
Did you just all of a sudden one day go from engineering to storytelling?
It was gradual. There was this opportunity to go be in Japan for a year and had this vision of sales and marketing kind of as the used car salesman, realizing that the most important thing isn't your product. The most important thing is what happens in the hands of your customer. And so I was drawn to that end of it, and that's how I got there.
Is it fair to say that when you started to make this transition that you felt like there was something missing?
I love finding the forest for the trees. Oh my gosh, when I can see through the complicated view of things and understand how things are connected, when I can find a way to label something that is so intuitive and clear, and it was there all the time, it's just nobody thought to call it that simple thing. That's where I get my thrills.
We don't really understand what we're looking at, and it requires an expert, somebody like you, to craft the message in a way that something or somebody else is going to understand. And we got this magic wand here we can give you, and it's called AI.
It focused on explaining the paradigm rather than the problem that they have. See your problem, XYZ, I can help you with that. At that point, the first hook comes before you explain to them how. Now they're invested enough, pay attention to listen to your wild new paradigm.
How do we communicate with the target audience in a way that doesn't make them be totally lost?
AI is a tool, and it will remain a tool. The solution is going to be where humans shift their role in this. We all have learned, you and I have grown up with assumption about what it is that we do that's valuable in the world. And if you look at the forecast for AI 5 years from now, 10 years from now, most of that is on the list of, AI is going to take care of that. I can't let AI tell me what to do, what reality is. I need to tell AI what I want to say or what I want to do. How do I do that? Help me do this thing I want to do. Versus, I think some people already are saying, AI, tell me what to do.
In a world full of so much noise, how's it possible to craft a simple, meaningful message that tells the right story? My guest today, Pete Steege, helps us understand how to do what most businesses can't: effectively communicate what they're trying to sell and why. Pete and I have a fascinating discussion about the art of human communication, what that looks like in business, and how AI is going to change everything. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. Where you came from and sort of how you got to where you are today in business.
Well, Brandon, I like to start that answer with, I like to say I was born an engineer, and then I kind of graduated into business from there. What I mean by that is I'm an electrical engineer, and I did that because I always liked to build things. I was just always into creating things, and I'm a very curious guy. I'm curious. I just want to learn all the time. So that kind of gave me an identity early on that I thought, well, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to build stuff. I was thinking bridges and airports early on, but then realized that if you're a civil engineer, you don't actually get to do that. You get to do other stuff. So, but maybe a little bit further back, I grew up in Minnesota. I started in Minnesota. My dad worked for 3M, and he was in the sales field. So I was actually born in Atlanta.
Oh wow!
2 years later, we moved to the kind of the mothership for 3M, which is Minnesota, and we lived there. And then when I was a teenager, we moved to Los Angeles, and then back to Minnesota. And then first job was New York, was in Europe, lived in Southern California, Japan.
Wow.
I did a lot of different things. I mentioned Germany. I worked in Germany. And I reflect back on my career, and I love that it started with this desire to learn and to build things. And so this engineering thing. And in the process, I ended up shifting pretty early in my career from that building things, creating things, to I actually found my creative home in in communication, really, right? So I found myself getting closer and closer to the customers in the businesses that I was at early on. So after 7 years, I was in marketing. And from then on, I spent 30 years doing that marketing thing. And I mentioned before those different places I've lived.
Yeah.
I love that. I kind of have wanderlust. So I love that in the process of doing all that with this technical / marketing overlay on my career, I experienced so many diverse things, both in my job, in the kinds of companies I worked for, in the places and the moments in time, almost like in history. I almost I joke with people. It's almost a little bit of a Forrest Gump thing for technology, um,
Interesting.
because I think probably a lot of us have that experience. But for example, when I had my first job, it was at IBM, and that was just so happened that was right at the peak of IBM's profit and size, 1984. Supercomputer everything. I'm sorry, mainframe computer everything, right? And I was one of 14,000 engineers in their chip factory in New York for the big mainframes, and went from there to work in what was then West Germany just before the wall came down, a few years before the wall came down. So there's that kind of point in time. And, no, I wasn't involved politically of anything, but it was so cool to look back and think, oh my gosh, that was so wild to see how things were then.
Yeah.
To ending up in Silicon Valley in the 80s and that crazy time. Japan, 1990, again, just on kind of luckily, I guess you could say, that's Japan Inc. peak. That was the
Yeah.
year that their stock was at the highest rate it had been. And then, they had the lost decade after that. Yeah. And then just a lot of technology evolutions in my career after that I won't go into the details of, that gave me kind of a perspective on how business works, how to, especially in the technology world that we live, the technology infused world we live in, where, my view on it is change is accelerating and continues to accelerate. And it's just a bigger and bigger factor in how we all transact and how businesses succeed and grow and leaders grow. And so anyway, I bring that experience. That's where I am today, 30 years of that, mostly technology marketing, but kind of this technology core for me, and
Yeah.
brought me to this place now where I'm helping B2B tech CEOs with growth. And for a long time, I kind of thought of it as a marketing problem that I was solving, which I was. But over the last 5 years, it's kind of evolved to me to realize that marketing is a symptom of the bigger problem, which is a lack of meaning in businesses, not tech CEOs. And I call them accidental CEOs because often they start like me as an engineer, not intending to be a CEO, find themselves in that journey in charge of the company, and that unique perspective. They tend to focus so much on the how it works and the capabilities and just let me tell you about it. It's so cool, and they love it, and it's really probably true, and they're passionate.
Right.
But that leaves a void because their customers aren't hearing what they need to hear. There's that meaning thing is missing, right?
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Well, so I don't want to pigeonhole or speak broadly or use stereotypes in saying this, so I hope it doesn't come across this way. But look, I mean, typically engineers or people that are more math focused often do not enjoy or do not excel at communication when it comes to things like marketing. I mean, to me, those are two vastly different sort of skill sets and interests. And so I think what I'm hearing is that you were on the engineering side, so long, but then you started to realize this is great and all, but it doesn't really mean anything if we can't communicate better um, in terms of what the company is solving or what the product is solving. And so did you just all of a sudden one day go from engineering to storytelling, or was it a gradual metamorphosis?
It's interesting you asked that. It was gradual. And I can remember the year, I don't know exactly what year, but where I was working in the small Silicon Valley company, and my role was product manager. So
Okay.
I was starting that, looking back, I was starting that shift from the lab, so to speak, to having to interact with requirements and what is needed. And so I was on this journey from the technology to the user, right? And there was this opportunity that we had, as I said, then really almost all the opportunities for our product were in Japan at the time. It was a really important market, and tiny company, we needed our new product to get launched there. And so I had this opportunity to go be in Japan for a year. And it was this sales/marketing job. It was being, with the product while it's being launched. And I just remember, had this vision of sales and marketing kind of as the used car salesman all together, right? It's the dark side. It's like, oh, I couldn't do that. That'd be giving up on what I love, right? Giving up on the, as you said, the technical interest.
Yeah.
And I think later I figured out, I'm glad I took the chance, because I did figure out that that's just as creative, different. And I think the answer to your question is why did that happen? I think I saw myself, it was a 7-year journey from when I graduated to when I went back to get my MBA in marketing. And over that time, I think as I was working on things, if it's a spectrum between the product and the customer, I kept finding myself drawn to the customer side. First it was product management, and then and next thing you know, I'm in the field and talking to people, and then it's how do we share? How do we tell them, right, what we do? So I think that's what it was. It was the realizing that the most important thing isn't your product. The most important thing is what happens in the hands of your customer, and so I was drawn to that end of it, and that's how I got there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense, from engineer to product manager, and then whether call it the intrigue or the understanding that, at least in my opinion, perception is reality when it comes to the buyer or any consumer. And so frankly, what a product actually does or how it works is important, but not as important as what the potential buyer thinks that it does and how it works, right?
Yeah, and that's true before they use it to choose it.
Correct.
And it's, in a way, it's also true after they use it, but those are two different things.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I found the most power comes when you peel away to the truth of things, so that there's no surprise when they choose something and they get it and it's not what they thought they were buying. So it's, yes, you need that perception to be right, but even better, you need the true value to be in the perception, so that when they get it, they're delighted, right? Versus cynical and, oh yeah, another I was fooled again, that kind of thing. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Sort of managing the expectations that it's great if you get them to buy it, but if they're disappointed, you're not going to get many other people.
Exactly.
Probably.
That's right.
Well, so is it fair to say that when you started to make this transition that you felt like there was something missing, or that you felt like there was either a problem or a challenge or something that wasn't quite, that you could maybe do better, or that you got something that others didn't, or was it just, oh yeah, this is actually the more important piece of this puzzle?
Reflecting back on that transition, I love finding the forest for the trees. That's oh my gosh, when I see, again, that truth, right? When I can see through the complicated view of things and understand how things are connected, or when I can find a way to label something that is so intuitive and clear, and it was there all the time, it's just nobody thought to call it that simple thing. That's where I get my thrills, right? I love to do that. It's kind of just the thing I love to do, my natural strength.
Gotcha.
So I think that's what drew me to it, because those problems I could solve in that marketing space, in the business space. In engineering, the high was, oh, I built this thing and it worked. It did that thing. And that was cool too. But the uncovering that thing that nobody else could see, that opened people's eyes and made light bulbs go off, was the thing that drew me, I think. Where I am today.
As call it, as an entrepreneur or as a CEO or tech CEO, where sort of along the spectrum of difficulty do you feel like crafting the right messaging falls?
For me?
Just generally. No. I mean, like, I mean, you've been all around the world. You've worked for a lot of different companies. Do you feel like most of the time people don't quite get the messaging right because it's a difficult thing to get? Or do you feel like that's, occasionally people stumble upon the right message? I mean, what are your thoughts on I get the feeling that a lot of times people may have a great product, but they don't understand how to explain it or message it, but you're the expert. So.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One, I think it is rare. I think especially in tech, it's most often companies aren't telling the right story. And they don't know that they're not, they're frustrated. They know it's not working, but they don't see it. It's out of their reach. The ones that do, some do, and some are wildly successful, are not, in my experience, are not the ones that found the right ad agency to pay. Because you'll hear a lot of success stories from ad agencies that talk about, wow, look what the Mad Men kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And they are skilled, and there's a skill there for sure. But if the company didn't first have something that was really valuable that they just couldn't express, and no matter how and maybe you could create a story that was exciting and everything, but then it gets back to what we said before. If it's not the truth, then you get one order, but you're not going to build a going concern that way, right? Because it's all about a reputation, and you are what you say you are, and it's valuable. And so I see several situations. One is we don't know what our story is, and those are the ones that are so exciting because it's there to uncover. And if they have a going business, there's probably a good value story there buried in there because it's there that they're able to succeed. They just have trouble getting started because, like you were asking before, prospects are busy. They're not going to, if they don't see the value being expressed, they're not going to take the chance to find out.
Yeah.
But if they have a business that's working, it's there. It's just finding it. And a lot of them, most companies don't have access to that truth. The ones that, so that, I think that's kind of true. Any company, even the biggest ones, the Googles and the Microsofts, started with a kernel of really, and sometimes you luck into it, but, and it's a little bit of right place, right time in terms of those jumps in growth that take you to the next level. But the story is rarely uncovered, but it's always there if you have a real business.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you have any examples off the top of your head for, maybe a business that had a great product, but just couldn't quite figure out the story or the messaging that ultimately got there?
There's a 3-person company that I worked with. three test engineering, like software test engineers that had a career, right? And they were really good at making test engineering work. And big, like Fortune 100 software organizations testing, right? That really important thing. And they had been in the bowels of these companies and decided to go off on their own. And they had this $1 million business. They had some contractors, but it was just the three of them. And they knew they had to find a way. They had the clients they had were their network. So they didn't have to convince anybody of anything. They knew them from their reputation, right? And we started working together because, Pete, we're just engineers. We don't understand how to do this, but we know we have something to value. How the heck do we get a Fortune 100 company to pay any attention to us? Because that's who our customers are. And we don't need very many. So we looked at their market and what they were doing. And the exciting thing that we found was there's this methodology in test engineering, it turns out, called shift left. Two one-syllable words that 20 years ago, somebody came up with as this best practice. It's kind of like agile methodology is for code development. For test engineering, it's shift left, right?
Okay.
Everybody knew it. They learned it in school, but it was an ideal state, and nobody was living it. They all knew it. It's like nirvana.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out that the strategy that these three people had mastered was essentially shift left. They figured out how to make shift left work. We looked online, and amazingly, nobody owned that term. Not officially, but also just not in the thought leadership space. It was available. So we just said, we're shift left done right. We do shift left. And again, I said they were a $1 million revenue company. Within 6 months, they landed a $4 million Fortune 100 account because that message could travel in that test engineering enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great example. That is a great example. I mean, so would you say it's sort of generally speaking, it's about kind of cutting to the heart of the matter to be able to quickly and concisely communicate what it is that you're an expert, what the value proposition is to somebody that's in that space? I mean, I know that's a drastic oversimplification, but
what I love about what you said, though, Brandon, is exactly what it is. It's cutting away the noise. It's not adding, it's subtracting. I'm launching a book named Radical Clarity, and it's all about doing less, doing the right things instead of adding to the noise. Think about our business world, our society today, and with AI coming, our inboxes are full of junk mail. Our texts are coming in. All the social media streams, all that stuff. We don't have time for anymore. We don't have time for what we have coming at us. The answer is not to do more of that and to turn up the noise. The answer is, again, these engineers, let me tell you how that works. No, I can't take it anymore.
I love that.
Tell it briefly, right?
I love that. And so I want to talk about radical clarity and sort of the premise of your new book. And then I want to get into what you mentioned earlier about that change is accelerating and what that means for this particular space and what you see sort of around the corner. But radical clarity, I love the title. Give us sort of the premise of, I mean, you sort of just did, right? But
pretty much.
How do you get there?
Yeah. So it started from the observation working with these accidental CEOs that they were having this problem. They were making a lot of noise and doing a lot of things without anchoring it on their truth, right? So, and from my experience, fixing that starts with, and it's working with the CEOs. It starts with the CEO. If the CEO doesn't, you can't give it to a committee. It really has to be central to them because it's not just about your marketing and your sales. It's about your product development. It's about your leadership. All of that is tied to that strong truth about who you are, right?
Yeah.
And as I work with clients, I found that there's a process we go through somewhat organically that I call the CMP growth wave. CMP stands for clarity, meaning, and purpose. And so what I mean by that is it starts with clarity. So the first thing we do is do some work together to clear away the clutter in their minds and in their thoughts and their team's thoughts, and together uncover that core meaning. So that's clarity to meaning. You got to start with the clarity to get to the meaning. And the meaning's right after clarity because that's the first thing you have to uncover. But once you know what your meaning is, then you can convert that into action with purpose, right? So you take that, why are we here? And you distill it into how you work with your team, what you say to your customers, your development roadmap, and we're off to do this is why we're here, and we're going to do this for our customers, and this is what we're signing up for. So everything is tied to that meaning. So you're not creating a plan for the year and priorities that start with your financial objectives. You're
Right.
starting on the other side with the meaning, and the financial objectives are the fortuitous result that comes from you pursuing your purpose. That's businesses that work. They're not doing it for the money, right? They just aren't.
Yeah.
Cynical
Yeah.
people would say that that's not always true. And yes, I guess you can buy businesses that way, but businesses that are gratifying to people, that help us be humans and help me to sleep at night, and I believe are the ones that have a purpose and a meaning, even if there's profit involved.
I could not agree more. So Simon Sinek has a TED Talk. I'm sure that you've probably seen, to start with why.
Yeah, I love him.
And he does a phenomenal job of just in a few minutes explaining that concept that, if you start, or if you really explain a brand or a company with why they're doing what they're doing, it's a whole, it reaches a different level than just a factual description of the products. And he talks about Apple and how, they could just choose to say, we build a little bit better computer or a different computer, but obviously that's not the case. And so I think a lot of people, so CMP, clarity, meaning, and purpose. I think that, I think a lot of people hear this. A lot of people, when I say people, a lot of like the business leaders, executives, they hear this and it resonates, but where the difficulty is getting there, it's sort of like, well, yeah, I get that and I want to do that. But how can you make that happen? And people like you and Simon Sinek, it rolls off the tongue and it's very easy to talk about. I mean, what's the process like of teasing all this out?
Well, first I'll use another Simon Sinek book to help tell the story, because I just finished The Infinite Game. Have you read that book?
Yep.
And that is relevant here as well, because, as you said, it starts with the why. That's that's very consistent with what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I found the way it gets implemented is, well, first and foremost, you have to have a CEO that believes in this, that meaning is important. Yeah. I can't help a CEO that is transactional, that is looking for meaning to be a gimmick or a tool to manipulate. And some are.
Gotcha. Sure.
And so that's the first thing. How do you do it? You have to believe in it, because it's not easy. And it's a long road to success. It's the harder road. But if you do, then what the next step is like is that the infinite game. This is not a win or lose activity today, whether I'm talking about trying to win a client, whether I'm talking about our next product developed, whether I'm talking about who's going to get promoted in this company. All of those tend to be zero sum. It's human nature for those to be zero sum. Yay, I won things. And, and I don't want to I give Simon Sinek total credit for that perspective. It applies to this CMP approach too, because if you look at it that way, purpose is not temporal victory, right? It's
Yeah.
it's the do you know David Brooks?
I don't.
Great writer, not business writer. Actually has a column in the New York Times, but he's written a couple books, and he talks about the difference between resume values and what is it when you go to a funeral? Starts with an R. Just somebody's talking about you. So basically, what they say at your funeral versus what's on your resume. Purpose is like that, right? I'm in this to add to the world. We're in this to add to the world. And it doesn't have to be gushy and soft. You don't have to be that way to do that. And so if you think of your business and growing your business and leading your team from the perspective of we're doing all of this for a reason together, and it's not that reason doesn't end at the end of the year with our results. It's about this thing that we figured out we could make that makes the world better, or makes companies do this easier, or reduces that cost, or whatever it might be. And if you have that perspective, what we talk about is, okay, your planning isn't, it changes how you plan. It changes how you prioritize. And it gives you room to decide to do things to help the overall journey, and maybe put up with some of the pain or the risk or the fear that is there if you are trying to solve that one thing that's right in front of you. And playing for the longer game, you're willing to put up and be patient and be courageous, right? And do those things. The other part of this is back to the doing less. That is part of the CMP process as well as you grow and scale the company. Meaning when you plan, one of the exercises I love to do with clients is, I call it map, gap, act. And it's a gap analysis for your business. It's a really check, and it helps you define what are the 2 or 3 things we should be focused on now, not dozens, right? And it's basically, you take a customer journey, familiar with that?
Oh yeah.
Mine is 7 stages, and you with your leadership team or whoever you want to be involved in this, you go through your customer, your ideal customer's journey, what they're experiencing in that ideal state, the thing you've planned your business for, that you started the business because you saw this solution. Well, what does that look like from when they don't even know who you are to how do they find out about you? How do they get curious? How do they commit to you? What's it like when they open the box? And what about 2 years into use and they love you? Like, what does that look like? And we document that. We describe that world.
Yeah.
Then we go back and we say, okay, now let's go through and do a reality check. What's it like today? Each of those 7. And there are gaps. There are a lot of gaps, probably. There are some places where it's working pretty much like you wanted to or you needed to. There's other places where it's pretty, no, it's not. There are some places where they are totally stuck. They're going around, right? Or that's where you lose them. Well, you've just identified your priorities for the business. And that's not a marketing exercise, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Because your product, this is their experience with you, which includes how they find you, but it also includes how they buy from you. It includes how you support them in using your product. It includes how they are done working with you, right? The whole ideal process, that's your business.
Yeah.
And that way now you've got your team, whatever role they have, they're purpose-driven, can agree, that's our most important priority. I mean, I have nothing to do with the success of my part of the business, but we all just agreed that is the biggest thing in the way of us being successful. And then what's next? What's next, right? So that's a way to isolate and reduce the effort and the complexity of your business, just like we reduced the complexity of your message. Simple is better. Simple is better. I like to say, make room for meaning.
Interesting. Does it matter? How do I think of the best way to ask this question? Is there a different approach if the if the product is like an incremental improvement on something that everyone knows about versus a disruptive innovation that's sort of hard for people to even wrap their mind around that hasn't been in the market before?
Oh, I love that question because I have a perspective about that. Have you read about category design? There's an author named Chris Lockheed, who I'd recommend your viewers,
Okay.
listeners read. It's this idea that success in the tech business, real success, sustainable success, comes when there is no competition for what you do. So I'm kind of cheating and answering your question, but I'm going to say both of those are not so different if you do it right. That in either case, you need to show up as a totally unique solution to their problem. And we can, just briefly, how you do that is, let's say you have, well, I'll give you another example if I may. I had a client, defense contractor, like defense electronics, and they were struggling because there were 10 defensive competitor contractors in their space that all had they couldn't stand out. They just felt like they melded in with the group of them all. And when we looked at that, we did an analysis and found that I graphed their space on two axes. One was technology, which is so important. Two was customer friendliness, ability to be a good partner, that kind of a dimension.
Okay.
Because as we talked about what they do, in that space, everything's bleeding edge. They're doing miracles with development with their clients all the time for these jet fighters and everything else. And it's messy. And they run into failures constantly in the process. And what they told me was their clients, one of the things their clients say about them is, you know what? You figure it out. Whatever it is, you stick with it and we solve the problem, no matter how messy it is. So when we graphed everybody's message in the market, these 10 competitors, what we found is they were all commodities when it came to technology. They thought of themselves as that's their unique special sauce, right? Well, when everybody says that's our unique special sauce, it's a commodity. They were all the most advanced technology. Nobody was prioritizing this message of, and we solve unsolvable problems, which is
Interesting.
just as important, maybe more important to their clients than their technology.
Yeah.
So the reason I say all that is we could position them to be the ones that solve unsolvable problems. And and we're really good with technology. Of course we are. It's table stakes.
Yeah.
And nobody else, they had the unique story to tell. So now they had to go to the market and explain that we do it this way, and this is why it's important. And to your question.
Yeah.
But I would say everybody that's successful needs to have a story that is new to the market. You just sometimes you have to find it.
Yeah. I love that example because the world's greatest defense technology company is I mean, I suppose that's interesting, but from a customer standpoint, solving unsolvable problems explains in and of itself why they have or the fact that they would have the world's best technology based on what the customer needs, not based on because they've come up with some cool new flux capacitor in the lab, which is another thing that I see often. There's all types of cool, interesting, innovative products, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really, business. You got to be able to separate the consumer from their cash.
Yes,
and
you have to solve a problem,
cool. Right? But where I was going was, and that makes complete total sense. But like AI is a good example, right? It's difficult, or when the internet really came about, it's difficult for some people myself included, to understand or to grasp how that might impact us. It's one thing to say, look, mousetraps have been around ever since we've had, food. We have a better mousetrap than a company that comes out with some other solution it's like, well, you don't even need a mousetrap because with this solution, a mouse will never get close to your home or something that.
A new paradigm.
Correct. A totally new paradigm versus something that consumers or other businesses are already sort of familiar with buying. Is that, do you run across that? And I see that I think that's going to be a fundamental challenge as AI becomes more widespread, more adopted, is explaining to everyday people what it actually does, because it sort of seems like, oh, we got this magic wand here we can give you, and it's called AI.
Yeah, my perspective on that is to do that, it's totally related to what I said before. If you are focused on explaining to them how it's different and how you make it work, and if you're focused on explaining the paradigm rather than the problem that they have, I can help you with that.
Got it.
See your problem, XYZ, I can help you with that. They don't even at that point, the first hook comes before you explain to them how.
Got it.
Now they're invested enough to pay attention to listen to your wild new paradigm.
So that's that's solving unsolvable problems, right?
Right.
So got it. And that makes perfect sense. It's almost, you almost have to take one step backward to
you got to get out of your head. It's not about you, right? It's about them. It's not about how, and you may have like you said, AI stuff. It's amazing, these tools, and what it's going to be able to do. It's going to be crazy, right? It's not what it's about. It's about, and I think I'll speak about my personal reaction to AI. It's scary. It's, oh my gosh, it's disruptive. It's going to disrupt all of our lives, some good, some bad. The last thing you want to do is to start in about how it's going to disrupt. You want to start with a problem that how is it going to help me? How's it going to help me? Or,
right.
What, then I'm versus what's it going to do to me?
Yeah. It's wild. It is wild. Just last week, I had one of my board members. We were talking about AI, and he said, "Well, do we need to look at potentially engaging some type of AI expert to answer some of these questions and be able to bounce things off of?" And I said, that's a good question. But as I thought more about it, I said, this may sound a little bit silly, but I don't think that we may or may not. But at the end of the day, we can just ask the AI the questions about what we would need from an expert. And so I mentioned that just because that's a very, very, very specific example. But I just think that the way that sort of business or businesses collectively approach problems and solve issues and challenges is going to be totally on its head.
I agree.
And that's going to, I think, pose a interesting sort of communications challenge. Another example is, so you have all these, like ChatGPT, for example, right? You open it up and it's just like a cursor blinking. It's like, so okay, what do I do? What can I do? And how? And I don't even know sort of where to start. And there's all these I think they call them prompt engineers. It's like it's this new cottage industry of people that can they've generated kind of templated prompts in order to set up the AI to be able to do what you. And to me, it's almost like a translator or somebody that can put a template or eyeglasses or something that we don't really understand what we're looking at, and it requires an expert, somebody like you, to craft the message in a way that something or somebody else is going to understand. And it's a very long-winded way of saying that, to me, in business, even in life, it's been scientifically proven. I've had guests on the podcast before talk about the impact of stories and storytelling and what it does in the brain and how it resonates at a deeper level. But there's so much noise, like you were talking about. There's just so much noise. And now there's a whole nother dimension of noise that is this kind of unknown out there with AI. How do we communicate with the target audience in a way that doesn't make them be totally lost? And I think that you're really onto something, and that it opened my eyes, just sort of answering my own question about how do you explain something with AI. And I think what I heard you say is, well, if you're trying to explain it, you're probably wrong, because you got to communicate what you're doing before you get to the point of explaining the features and benefits. But so is there, is this sort of a solvable problem? And is this something where 10 times out of 10, you sit down with a business and you guys come out with radical clarity on the other end and it's sort of done? Or is this kind of a ongoing, never-ending approach, call it?
So there's the first piece that is so important, that is uncovering that clarity. That's the start, and it's usually an aha moment, and it's a one-time exciting thing. But it's it's the infinite game. It absolutely has to continue. We talked about the message has to be crisp, but the operation has to be crisp too, given the ease. I'd love to talk about AI for a minute too, but
please.
Even just before AI, think of all the apps, the tools that are so easy. They seem free to start with, and companies everywhere are bloated with activity because they get that free app, they get that free CRM, and it's this cool tool. Well, it's not free. They're dividing their mind share and their team's mind share, fragmenting it in all these different directions. Think of in that the dashboards are full of metrics. I call them cosmetrics, that are fun to look at. But I love the rule to use is, if you're in a meeting, somebody reports on the metric numbers, did anybody do anything different from reading that number? And think about it. So often, no, they're just listening to the number, right?
Yeah.
That's just that's an example of what's happening throughout companies, right? So that discipline, clarity and purpose they work the other way too, right? Purpose drives clarity. Sorry.
Yeah.
Purpose drives clarity. If you're on target, if you're focused, you're saying no. If your business is not saying no to attractive things, you're going to get lost, because given our world, and with AI, it's going to be all the worse. There's so much you can do to fill your business's time and mind share. Use a personal example: social media feeds. The temptation to pull up your phone and scan through Instagram or something. That's a problem for a lot of people. It's the same mechanism. It's this simple, easy. It takes no effort at all. There's no friction, and the next thing you know, you're doing something that's really not what you want to be doing. Businesses do that every day with their investments and their activity and their priorities, right? But if I can talk about AI, I loved what you were saying before.
Please.
AI is I believe AI is on a path to break marketing. And it will have to be rebuilt in a totally new way. What I mean by that is this noise thing. Think about your inbox today, and then apply a productivity tool that makes it 100 times easier to write an email, 100 times easier to create a message, to send a video, to do all those things. You're going to look back at now and say, "Oh, remember when my inbox was so quiet?" Right? Then it's going to totally overwhelm all of our communication channels, and it's going to be better quality than it is today. You're not going to be able to tell if it's me sending that email. There's probably even going to be a video of me before too long that you wouldn't know if this is me that's on your podcast, right?
Yep.
Well, what is that? That doesn't help any, that's all of us collectively destroying the current communication channels because we could, right? Because I got to do that. My competitors are doing it. Well, so what that means is I'm not going to read my email anymore, probably. I'm not going to look at texts. I may not even answer my phone because I don't want to talk to a robot. So I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
But the answer is something different than the way all those things work today. So there's a lot of change coming. I take it back. I do know what the answer is. The answer is the most human wins. How we do that is not clear. And I think that is different for every company. But what is going to become the precious resource is authentic human communication.
Yeah.
Doesn't scale.
Right.
Companies are going to start to figure out, how can I make a connection with clients that they know is real, they know is authentic, and that it's communicating my real who we are. And it won't be perfect. If you do it right, it's because AI can smooth out everything, right? And even that is not going to be what we want. What we really want is a way to, like we are here on your podcast, Brandon, right? I think that's part of the value of this is we're having this real conversation about our real experiences.
Yep. I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think that, there's a new sort of medium for communication has got to arise at some point. If you think, I was thinking about this the other day. We used to have telephones, and then things like call waiting and answering machine. People used to leave like a lot of messages on answering machines, and then we got email, electronic mail, and that sort of got overloaded. And then so it's like, well, if I really want to get in touch with somebody, I'll text them. Then so everyone then texting became sort of the personal, the way of personally communicating. But now text is sort of, that same way that email went. And I don't know if I know there are tools out there. I don't know if they'll succeed, but like where all of that, the AI solution will sort of distill all that stuff and then say, look, here are the important communications that you need to hear. But it's interesting to think about what, I guess, let me back up. As it relates to messaging and marketing, social media, when that sort of became big, all of a sudden there's this whole different way that you got to connect with and communicate with potential customers or existing customers and maintain relationships. Have you thought about, or what are your thoughts on what that looks like, 5-10 years from now?
Well, sadly, I have a name for it. It's called the abstraction arms race. And it's the idea that you're right. We can't handle those flows. But we know somebody who can, right? AI.
Yeah.
It's really what's happening now on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is abstracting all the Google information.
Yeah.
It's happening. Yes, those tools will be there, probably already exist. I just don't know about them.
Right.
The problem is, what is that? That's removing you another layer from real, right?
Yeah.
So that's not the answer. So really what's happening on both sides. On the one side, I'm a company and I need to reach my people, and I have this tool, AI, that can create all this great content and messages, and I hit go and look at it, we're doing it. We're sending out 10 times more than we did before.
Yeah.
And the other side, their clients or their partners are looking at their inbox like, oh my gosh, AI, push the button. Yay, AI is taking all of that and packaging it up. Well, we just added a whole layer of abstraction between ourselves. And that is the opposite direction of me as a business wanting to connect and make a relationship with my clients. I've just stepped back a whole big step.
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer, but I don't think that's the answer.
Right.
AI is a tool and it will remain a tool. The solution is going to be where humans shift their role in this. Because we all have learned, you and I have grown up with an assumption about what it is that we do that's valuable in the world. And if you look at the forecast for AI 5 years from now, 10 years from now, most of that is on the list of, AI is going to take care of that.
Yeah.
Well, are we going to sit around like the Wall-E movie and in chairs and watch TV? I don't think so. So what is that? What is our new role? What is my business's new role in this? And that's where I get back to that being human, and like we're gonna have to be creative. But I think what I see the path forward is, without knowing the details, is first and foremost we have to maintain the leadership role over AI. And personally, I'm not saying about the bots taking over the world, but I'm saying I can't let AI tell me what to do or what reality is. I need to tell AI what I want to say or what I want to do. To your question, how do I do that? Help me do this thing I want to do. Versus, I think some people already are saying, AI, tell me what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I was having this conversation fairly recently, and it sort of evolved into to this thought experiment about what it's going to be like. And the question that we were sort of asking ourselves was, okay, well, I guess maybe one way to think about it is, imagine that everything on our to-do list, short term, sort of midterm, everything on our to-do list is taken care of. And will be done before we're hoping it will be done. If that were the case, then what is it? What would we do? What would we want to focus on? And I think that, at least in part, sort of addresses your question. Is it's going to, at minimum, eliminate 90% of the things we spend our time on that are ultimately, not now, but in the future, will be a waste of time because something else could do it. And so it will allow us to kind of get to the real purpose of our role or our position. And what is that? That's a really, interestingly, I think that's a really difficult question for a lot of people to answer, and goes directly to the heart of what I imagine that you spend a lot of time talking to your clients about.
Yes, absolutely. Related to what you just said, I think there's another dimension to that. I totally agree with the choice you just mentioned, that if it can do 90%, what do we do with the 10%? But I think there's also a thing going on, much like, think of things like exercise, where before all our modern society, exercise just happened from living life. You walked places and you worked your job, things like that. When we started working at a desk, I go to the gym. I choose to do things that I don't have to do for the physical delivery. What it gets, I do it because I'm a human being and I feel better when I use my body. I think there's an aspect of that with AI too, where we're going to need to consciously choose what thing that AI could do perfectly well am I going to choose to continue to do myself. Another example is art, right?
Yeah.
Artists. The artists that are successful are creating something that, a machine could probably do what they're doing, but they're doing it in a human way. And I think we're valuing in art, we're not valuing the actual painting. We're
Right.
valuing the process that a human did to create the painting. And we're respecting the athletes the same way, right? We value seeing a human stretch themselves, right? So I think there's an aspect of that where we all are going to choose some of those things and keep them for ourselves because it makes our business what it is, or it makes us who we are.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the movie WALL-E. I have kids. I've got 5 kids, and they've watched that movie plenty of times. I actually think about that movie often.
Yeah.
Because I felt like that was such a clever, insightful sort of, I don't know, depiction of sort of humanity and the things that, the direction that we're headed. And I think about in that movie, I don't remember the name of the store, but it's sort of like the Walmart, whatever, like Big and Large or something,
Yeah.
is everywhere. And what you just said about sort of recognizing that, yeah, there's things that AI could do, but I'm going to do that because it's more authentic, or because I need to keep those muscles strong. I think I agree 1,000%. And I think it'll be similar to, there's Walmart and Home Depot and Starbucks, these behemoth multinational corporations where you can go get a cup of coffee or buy a hammer that everyone loved and enjoyed, and prices were great. But then you sort of saw this backlash of like, well, buy local, go to the local hardware store instead of Home Depot.
Yes.
Same
analogy.
I think it'll be just like that, where it's like, yeah, but let's do it with humans.
Yes.
Because it's more authentic and purposeful, and there's probably something to that you can't get from the machine.
Yes, totally. And there's a human element to that often.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, like, this decade, it's all about the lack of human interaction because of technology and social media. No one ever talks face to face anymore.
Yep.
And I think whatever the next decade or next time somebody's talking about this, it'll be, well, humans don't do anything anymore, so we got to get back to, I don't know, writing notes or something, whatever, actually typing an email, or however you input emails at that point, if there is email. But that's fascinating. I could talk about that for a whole nother hour. I'm curious. So we talked a lot about, or all about, business and commerce in general, in terms of crafting messages that resonate, that are born out of sort of truth and purpose. I personally don't think that it's limited to business, and I often think about this, particularly as it relates to politics and sort of social issues. Do you have? I'm sure you got a million thoughts on that, but what are your thoughts on? Do you find yourself sort of picking apart messaging and tactics in that realm, that sort of, as it bleeds over from your practice in business?
I'm thinking of three areas. Business, we talked about. Public communication, politics, yes, but also personal interaction. Like, think of CEOs, leadership, leading their team is such an important part of their job, right? All three of those, I can't tell the difference. It's the same stuff. It's absolutely the same stuff. It's about relationships. Whether I'm buying something at a store, whether I'm winning having somebody vote for me, whether I'm having my team follow me. If we don't have a relationship, if it's a transaction, it's never going to break through. And relationships come from meaning, right? If you don't have a purpose for investing or trusting, risking on a candidate or your CEO, you won't do it. Just the same as if you're buying a product.
Yeah.
I believe it's all the same. And the same thing about the clarity and the truth and less is more, all of that. totally applies. I don't see a difference. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun
no,
to.
I agree. And you know what just occurred to me, sort of the common thread over the last 10 or 15 minutes, we talked about, well, we're going to want to do this because we don't want to leave it up to AI. We talked about, or at least I mentioned, sort of lack of interpersonal communication. It occurs, I think that human beings have we crave authenticity.
Yes, so true.
And it's like the reason why sometimes you want to go to a local hardware store instead of a national chain is because there may be, somebody that lives in your community that's there that can tell you what parts you need for your water heater or whatever. But not only I think do we crave authenticity, but we have some type of meter that we can tell when there isn't authenticity or when something isn't genuine. And I think about it almost more often in the sort of realm of politics. Everything that you hear whether coming out of DC or this congressman said this or this senator. I think that generally speaking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Generally speaking, it doesn't matter what the actual message is, what the words are that are coming out of somebody's mouth. People can tell if it's authentic or if it's just being spoken to score political points, or if there's spin. And I don't think I've really thought about this before, but I assume that consumers generally sort of have that same kind of meter and can hear inauthentic marketing jargon and differentiate it from sort of a passionate purpose for solving unsolvable problems, for example, right?
I do think there's a spectrum from transaction to commitment, long-term commitment in all these fields, right? So yeah, I'm buying a candy bar at the grocery store. Don't need a whole lot of purpose there other than I got a sweet tooth, right? Versus buying a $100,000 services contract for my business, multi-year services contract, right? There's a difference in how much time I'm going to invest in understanding, are they being authentic with me? Probably don't care about on the candy bar side, right? I think it's true in politics and in leadership as well. So that's part of it. But I do, so for the bigger political topics, absolutely, and I think some politicians are good at faking authenticity.
Sure.
Some companies are good at it too.
Sociopaths are fantastic. They're
great at it, right?
Excel at it. Yep.
So that's a danger. I think there's big corporations that are I'm not judging anybody in particular, but some of them are soulless, right? There's not a lot of meaning there at all, but you feel good talking, you feel good with their brand.
Right.
That's an example of the sociopath politician, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. It's a parallel.
Well, so how do you how do you sort of coach executives or CEOs in terms of how to find and consistently hang on to that authenticity?
Well, back to the purpose, right? The meaning. It starts. That's why we start with uncovering their meaning first, and then you just hang on. You wrap your arms around that meaning, and that's your touchstone, right? If you know that, it's like self-knowledge, right? If you know what's important, capital W, capital I, what's important for you and your business.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you're going back to that every day, right? And you're checking in. Is what I'm doing authentic with where we want to go and who I am? And that meaning, by the way, isn't just about a business. It's about you as a CEO and your values and your perspective. It is all part of that true story. It has to be real. But if you found that, that's the gold. Authenticity if you don't know what that is, how could you possibly be authentic?
Right. Yeah. Good point.
But if you know what it is, now you can govern your authenticity somewhat, right?
Yeah.
Am I being true? Am I being true to this? Are we being true, team? Hey, team, this isn't who we are, right? Now, hey, team, this new product we're planning, how does it fit with where we're going, right? It makes everything, rather than you trying to corral them and convince them to play well together, to herd the cats and all the exciting things when you scale a business, that doesn't work. But if you're all remembering where you're going, people can self-govern more.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, so Pete, to the listener who's a CEO or an entrepreneur or an executive who agrees and this message resonates with them in terms of, this is I do need to find I need to find radical clarity. Sort of how somebody, when you open up ChatGPT, it's like, where do I even start? What's the first step that they can take to start practicing this? Do you have a website? Is there, or when does your book come out? All that stuff.
I wanted to offer my book because that's really why I wrote it. That's what it's about, is how CEOs can use this CMP that we talked about to have this path. So the book comes out in mid-May 2025. Real excited. And by the way, I've created a landing page for your listeners that is at my website, b2b-clarity.com, boundary/boundary. So I'll say that again, b2b-clarity.com/boundary. And I'll have some resources that are bonus resources, free resources for your listeners that'll help them get started on the journey. One thing,
that's great.
Sure. One thing is an online assessment called the Accidental CTO Audit. CEO Audit, sorry. That is 15 questions online that helps them maybe understand where their gaps are in their understanding of, their issue with this here as a starting place. But then, of course, I'd love for them to take advantage of the book as well.
Now, that's perfect. So b2b-clarity.com/boundary.
Yes.
And so, my goodness, you were prepared for that one. That's exactly where somebody should start. And will the book be available on Amazon or is it?
Okay. It'll be Amazon, and we'll have a Kindle version as well when we launch.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you, I've taken a lot away from this. And I think you have a unique and valuable insight into what is one of the most important aspects of not just business, but leadership, politics, you name it. But that it's not just a one and done thing. It's like exercise, that it's something that you have to continue to come back to, and having a disciplined sort of purposeful process for doing so, I think is critical. And I know I don't. We don't in my business, and that's one of the things that I was just taking notes. One of the things that we've got to fix is, I think we understand. I hope we understand the concept, and we try hard to sort of implement radical clarity, but we don't have a purposeful, regimented sort of process that we can fall back on to ensure that we're doing it. And I think that'd be really, really helpful.
Well, Brandon, it's been great to be on your show, and I wish that for you.
Well, thank you. And I apologize for blabbing so much, but you got my wheels turning. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, because I feel like this is an art that is often overlooked, and the world's best businesses are masters at this. And I feel like even with a inferior product, I feel like, or an inferior offering, if the messaging is not the right word. If the communication is authentic and derived from, passion, then I feel like you can win a whole lot of customers and fans and partners. And it's just at the very core of what it means to run a business. So I'm thrilled that you agreed to come on. Really, really appreciate it. Is there anything that you were hoping that we would get to or hoping we would talk about that we didn't touch on?
Brendan, it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I can't think of anything important that we didn't touch on. So I really appreciate you taking us on the journey.
Well, good. Well, we appreciate it as well. And we'll make sure to have the link to b2bclarity.com/boundary. We'll try to put that up on the screen here toward the end of the podcast. But Pete, it was a pleasure. Congrats on finding your passion and helping others understand this sort of what can be, in my mind, what could be a mind warping topic for how to communicate. You're the best.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Brandon Ansley, host of the Boundary Breakers podcast. I just wanted to take a second and say thank you so much for all of your support over the last year with the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and go hit the like button, rate the episode depending upon your thoughts, and then leave a comment or two. We'd love to hear some feedback. Also, don't forget that there are more than 50 other podcast episodes for Boundary Breakers on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or any other mainstream podcasting platform. Thank you guys so much. See you the next episode.